What is the state of Iran's nuclear program right now? One of the reasons the US and Israel gave for starting the war was this.
They're totally fanatic about this, about the goal of destroying America. So they started building new sites, new places, underground bunkers that would make their ballistic missile program and their atomic bomb programs immune within months. If no action was taken now, no action could be taken in the future. And then they could target America, they could blackmail America, they could threaten us and threaten everyone in between. So action had to be taken, and you needed a resolute president like Donald J. Trump to take that action.
So what's happened since the strikes began? Is Iran's nuclear program now degraded, damaged, or even destroyed? William Alberque is going to help us understand that. He spent decades in senior roles working on non-proliferation and the control of nuclear weapons.
Well, what we know right now is that the Iranian enrichment facilities, and they had three declared facilities, one at a place called Fordo and two at a place called Natanz. Those facilities have been extensively bombed. There are also facilities like research reactors and a power reactor that were not bombed. But in terms of enriching material towards the potential for nuclear weapons use, it's those three enrichment facilities, the one at Fordo and then the two at Natanz, that were bombed. The facility at Natanz was especially large and very deeply buried. And so the US used very special bombs to burrow deep into the ground and destroy the holes. In the meantime, Iran was moving the uranium once it was enriched off-site. The IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which was monitoring the enrichment of Iranian uranium right up until the bombing on June 13th, 2025, they estimate that Iran had about 440 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, another 185 of 20%, 6,000 of 5%, and 2,400 of 2%. So they had a substantial amount of material that was enriched to 60%, which is near weapons usable. But a lot of that had been moved off-site to a facility at Esfahan, in buried facilities there. We don't know the status of that material, and the IAEA has demanded access to it, and the Iranians have refused. We don't know if Iran has unburied that material and moved it elsewhere, if it's still buried there, and how much uranium is still at the bombed facilities in Natanz and Fordo.
The airstrikes by the US and Israel last year and this year represent the fiercest demonstration yet of their intent to destroy Iran's nuclear infrastructure. But how much of a blow have they actually dealt to Iran?
Well, yeah, it's really hard to say because it's hard to know what the baseline is. I mean, obviously, you have the US statements from June 2025 that said the program was obliterated, which, quite frankly, was a bit of an overstatement. As I mentioned, we don't know the status of the highly enriched uranium. It could all be fine. And you're talking about 440 kilograms of uranium, which is enough for about 10 to 12 bombs. We just don't know the status, where it is. Has Iran recovered it? Is it safely stored somewhere else? Is it still buried under rubble? We just don't know. We know that the facilities that they had created to do all the enrichment that they had been doing were destroyed up to that point. But there's a lot of material that may have been stored off-site that we just don't know about, to including stuff that would help them enrich, like centrifuges and other equipment. So the baseline is unclear. Then the new strikes, what have they accomplished? That's very, very unclear because, as I mentioned, we don't know. There's this new facility that they were building. We don't know exactly what was happening there. That looks like it was struck by penetrator bombs that the US uses, like the GBU-57. And this other facility that Iran, we don't think, has populated yet with centrifuges. I don't even know if it's been hit yet. So I can't say at all how much the recent strikes have further set back Iran's program because it's so unclear as to the exact status. That's why Rafael Grossi, who's the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, has been begging Iran for some kind of access or clarity on the status of their materials. Iran obviously wants to hide all this because they're trying to protect it from further US and Israeli strikes. So I'm sorry to say, clear as mud right now.
And what about reports that the US and Israel are thinking of sending special forces into Iran to seize nuclear material at some of the most fortified locations on Earth? Is that even possible?
So if the US or Israel know where that material is, I suspect that they probably would have just destroyed it from the air. Sending in a ground team is incredibly complex and difficult in operation. It risks huge casualties. And quite frankly, the radiation risks of hitting this stuff from the sky is relatively low. The only question would be is if it's too deeply buried under strikes, or if it's in very, very deeply protected bunkers that the US is not confident that it could destroy, then a ground option may be the only way to ensure that they can get at it. But I would think there would just be better options right now than to send in commando teams.
There have been fears that Iran was just days away from building a nuclear bomb. But how much truth is there in that? How quickly could Iran build a bomb?
Right. So if we go back to, say, June 1st last year, when all their facilities were operating, to enrich the material that they have from 60% to 90% would take days, if not weeks. And then you would have to take that material and you'd have to convert it into a metallic form, because when they're enriching it, it's in the form of uranium hexafluoride gas. And so you would have to concentrate that down, turn that into a metal. Then you would take that metal and you turn it into a sphere. That sphere, highly enriched uranium, would be around 20 to 25 kilograms. You'd build the conventional bomb around that. You'd put that in a warhead, and then you'd put that on a missile. That whole process would take weeks to months. And it would require specialized facilities for handling the highly enriched uranium, for turning it into metal, for turning that metal into pits, the center of a bomb, and then manufacturing the warhead itself and putting that on a missile. Now that so many of the Iranian nuclear facilities where they used to do this work have been damaged, the facilities I mentioned at Natanz and Fordo, the Esfahan complex, where they turned uranium into metal. They said they were doing it for medical purposes or for fuel for reactors, but it's the same facility that you would use to make a bomb pit, as we call it. That facility has been wiped out. So it's not impossible for them to do this, but it's just incredibly difficult considering all the dedicated facilities and equipment they had designed to turn uranium into metal that they could then use to build a bomb, have been destroyed or heavily, heavily damaged. So I couldn't even estimate how long it would take them to do it, but they would need to reconstruct a place to enrich the uranium gas they have from 60% up to past 70, probably closer to 90%. They need to take that, turn it into metal. They need to, so it would be really difficult for them to hide that at the scale they would need to in order to make 10 to 12 bombs. And that I assume the United States and Israel would be able to detect fairly quickly and hit. So it would be an incredibly highly risky maneuver for Iran to take.
And what about the idea that Iran is receiving outside help with its nuclear program? Or is it going it alone?
We don't believe they are, and by we I mean the Western intelligence community and even the International Atomic Energy Agency does not see evidence of outside support. Russia, which is a traditional ally of Iran, although clearly they have not been a great military assistance to Iran in its current conflict, Russia has been very careful not to cooperate or to be seen to cooperate with Iran on weaponization. They've been fairly consistent in the International Atomic Energy Agency, supporting the idea that Iran should comply with its international obligations. Obviously, they are more sympathetic to Iran in these settings, but there is absolutely no evidence that Russia or China or North Korea or Pakistan or any country has assisted Iran. Iran is very actually proud of their own scientific prowess here. And I think they don't want to have to rely on anyone else in their developments. And they have a very long line of scientists who've been working on this program since the 1980s. And I don't really think they need a lot of assistance. That's one of the things about nuclear weapons. Building a nuclear weapon isn't really a technical challenge. It's not a science challenge. It's a challenge of access to the material, which is why IAEA safeguards are so important, why the international community's ability to monitor is so important with any country that uses or handles nuclear material.
It's believed there are 9 countries with nuclear arms, but several others have expressed an interest in pursuing nuclear weapons programs. But will they be deterred? What lessons can they learn from Iran's case?
Well, it's tough to say because on the one hand, you would have to say that the international system for detecting nuclear weapons programs worked really well with the case of Iran. Unfortunately, early on, the program flourished without a lot of transparency, but the lessons from the Iraq War and the lessons from Iran's cheating in the 1990s and early 2000s has led to a strengthening of the international system. So I guess a lesson for a country that wanted to seek nuclear weapons would be to do the whole thing completely off the grid, to not connect it to a nuclear power program, which would have to be created under intense international scrutiny. So, for instance, if Saudi Arabia wanted to build the bomb, just naming them because they've expressed an interest in building nuclear power facilities and enriching uranium, all of their efforts are under so much international scrutiny that building a bomb within that civilian program, that hiding it within a civilian program, would be impossible. So if Saudi Arabia wanted to build a bomb, they would have to do it completely separate from any other nuclear activities at facilities that are completely not located there, with scientists that are not internationally known to have worked on nuclear issues and therefore will raise questions about where they are and what they're working on, with material that they would have to completely clandestinely source because all uranium, all the related material, all plutonium, all of this is tracked very, very closely all around the world. So you would have to do a program from scratch completely off the grid, or your other option would be to buy a nuclear weapon off the shelf, to go to someone like North Korea and see if you could purchase it, because the development of it would attract so much scrutiny and so much risk of attack.
And what about the argument that says countries are safer with nuclear weapons? William Alberque doesn't think so.
Nuclear weapons are not a magic panacea for your country's security, and in fact, actually, I think risks international agreement that your country should be attacked. I think that's a really important lesson here. The idea that a lot of people have that, oh, if Iran had just raced to a nuclear weapon, they would have been safe. No, actually, they would have been attacked much harder and much earlier. I think that's important to say because otherwise, really, we give the impression that nuclear weapons are just like a magic spell that you put over your country and you're safe forever, and they're really not.
I'm Pablo Follielias. Thanks for joining us. It's always great to get your comments and questions. So until next time, take care.